Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a scalpel to one of the most intense debates in modern media.
It really is.
We're talking about that tension between, sticking to the source material and making creative casting choices.
Right. And to be clear, our mission for this deep dive is we're not talking about adaptation theory in general.
No.
We are analyzing one powerful, very detailed from the source. It's about a major casting decision, and we're going to operate strictly as guides.
Guides to what exactly?
To the author's logic.
Wow.
We want to unpack the specific words they use, the structure of their argument, and just understand it from the inside out without taking a side.
That's the key. Okay, so before we even get into the argument, we have to start with the person at the center of it all, the actor.
Yeah, the sources were very clear about it. The actor is Leah Jeffries. And just as importantly, the sources made a point to specify the pronunciation first name.
Which is?
It's Leah. So Leah is pronounced Leah.
Leah Jeffries. Okay, and I think it's important to start there. I mean, why is getting a detail, like a name pronunciation right, so critical before we dive into something this charged?
Well, it does a couple of things. First, it's just a matter of respect. But for our purposes, it grounds the whole discussion. We're about to dissect a really passionate, really controversial argument.
For sure.
Focusing on a specific, verifiable detail like that reminds us, and you, the listener, that we are dealing with specifics here. It anchors us in reality before we get into the more abstract claims.
Yeah.
It shows we're paying attention, which is exactly what the source material itself is trying.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so we have the central figure, Leah Jeffries, and our analysis of the source material shows the author's argument against her casting is built on four main pillars.
That's right.
First, we need to look at the super strict character description they use as their gold standard.
The baseline.
Exactly. Second, we have to dive deep into the claims the author makes about race, ancestry, and what they call racial essentialism.
And that's where we need to move carefully.
Oh, absolutely. Third, we'll see how the source connects all of this to, of all things, the racial identity of ancient Greeks and their gods.
It's a huge leap, and we'll unpack it.
And then finally, we'll look at the specific, very strong term the source uses to condemn the whole decision, the word blackwash.
It's a comprehensive argument, and each layer builds on the last. So I guess we should start.
Let's do it. The character baseline. To really get why this critique is so intense, you have to start where the source starts, with its absolute non-negotiable definition of the character, Annabeth Chase.
And the source pulls no punches. I mean, The very first statement is the entire argument in a nutshell.
It's the thesis, right?
It is. It says, quote, Leah Jeffries doesn't fit as Annabeth at all. That phrase, at all, is doing so much work there. It signals that for this author, there is zero room for interpretation.
So from the jump, the source is telling us that the most important thing, the only important thing maybe, is visual fidelity, a literal physical match.
Exactly. The criteria for whether the casting is good or bad are established right there. It has to look a certain way. Any deviation from that is, in their view, a total failure.
It's a categorical failure, not just a slight miss.
And the source doesn't leave you guessing what that certain way is. It immediately lists the physical traits from the books that it considers immutable.
Okay, so let's get those on the table because they are the foundation for everything that follows. What are they?
3 specific things. Annabeth is described as being blonde, white, and has gray eyes.
Blonde, white, and gray eyes. So you have hair color, a racial category, and a very specific eye color.
Correct. And for the source, these 3 traits are not just descriptions, they are requirements. They are the threshold that an actor must meet to fit the role.
Which is a huge takeaway right from the start. The author is framing fidelity as a checklist of visual characteristics. If you can't tick all 3 boxes, then you don't fit at all.
It puts the entire debate squarely on the territory of literal appearance versus, say, thematic interpretation or performance.
Right. It completely removes things like acting ability or chemistry with other actors or, capturing the spirit of the character.
All of that becomes irrelevant in this frame. The source is saying the discussion begins and ends with matching these visual specs. It's almost like an inventory.
That's a great way to put it. And because it's so rigid, the rest of the source material has to be dedicated to justifying why those specs, especially the racial one, are so important.
Exactly. The source knows it can't just say, she has to be white. It feels the need to build a case, a fortress of logic to prove why that trait is essential and non-negotiable.
So the first section gives us the what Annabeth is supposed to look like. Now we have to move into the why.
And this is where the argument gets really, really detailed. We have to slow down and dissect the logic piece by piece.
All right, let's get into it. The source's claims on race and identity.
Now, we have to be extremely careful here. Our goal is to analyze the source's internal logic, how it builds. We're not here to validate it or debunk it, just to understand it.
Right, we're just looking at the architecture of the argument itself.
And the foundation of that architecture is an idea called racial essentialism. That's a key term here.
Okay, so break that down for us. What does essentialism mean in this specific context?
It means the source views a character's race not as just a descriptive detail that could be changed for an adaptation, but as an essence, a core, unchangeable part of their...
Like it's in your DNA.
Almost literally, yes. In this view, once Annabeth is defined as white, that's it. It's a permanent state. It's like a chemical property that cannot be altered or transferred no matter what an adaptation might need or want. Hashtag 2.1.
And the source doesn't ease into this idea. It drops a huge rhetorical question right at the start of this section that basically lays out this whole worldview.
It really does. It asks, since when can a black girl be someone? That question is the philosophical core of the entire. It sets up a world of strict, mutually exclusive identity. If you are in the black category, the source argues, you are fundamentally barred from representing a character in the non-black category.
There's no overlap. It's a binary.
A completely rigid bind. And that leads directly to the flip side, the one about Annabeth herself.
Which is?
The source states, with total certainty, she'll always be white no matter what.
So the actor's identity is fixed and the character's identity is fixed. And because they are different, the casting is impossible.
That's the logic. The source is arguing that the character's race is a permanent structural part of her fictional identity. It's not just a description in a book, it's a rule that must be followed. It's a canonical law.
And to prove that law, to prove Annabeth is, as they say, irrevocably white, the author knows they need more than just the book's description.
Right, they have to lock it in.
Which brings us to their analysis of her parentage, both her human father and her divine mother.
Yes, and this is maybe the most fascinating and detailed part of the entire text. The source attempts to use a sort of pseudogenetic analysis to prove its point.
It's an extraordinary effort to build a scientific-sounding case.
It really is. Let's start with the mortal father, Frederick. The source acknowledges that he's American, but then immediately dismisses that as irrelevant.
Right. Instead, it focuses on what?
His name. Just his first. The source says, and I'm quoting here, Frederick sounds like he's originally German.
Okay, so it's a linguistic observation.
Yeah.
Based on the sound of a name.
It is. But it's what the source does with that observation that's so critical. Based solely on the sound of the name Frederick, the source draws an absolute conclusion.
And that conclusion is?
That Frederick has a 100% chance that he's white.
100%.
100%. We have to pause on that. Because right there, the source's entire methodology for racial classification is laid bare. It completely ignores the American context, centuries of migration, assimilation, mixed heritage.
All of that complexity is gone.
It's gone. It's replaced by a simple phonetic. If the name sounds German, the person is, with mathematical certainty, white. The name is treated like a racial.
That is a staggering logical leap. That 100% modifier is so important. It leaves no room for doubt, no room for anything else.
And it has to be 100%. For the source's argument to work, the father's whiteness must be absolute, so the daughter's whiteness can be absolute. There can't be even a 0.1% chance of ambiguity.
Wow. Okay, so that's the mortal father, Frederick.
Yeah.
Annabeth is a demigod. The source also has to account for her mother.
Goddess of yes. And the source applies the same rigid racial logic to the divine parent.
So how do they racialize a Greek goddess?
Very directly. The source just asserts as a fact that Athena is white.
It just states it. Athena is white. Full stop.
Full stop. And that's a huge rhetorical move. It's assigning a modern human racial category to a mythological being from ancient Greece who exists completely outside of our concepts of genetics or race.
So why do that? Why is it so necessary for the argument to insist that Athena is white?
It does two things. First, it makes the math simple. If dad is 100% white because of his name, and mom is definitively white because the source says so, then the daughter, Annabeth, must close.
It eliminates any potential loopholes.
Exactly. But more importantly, it shows the source's commitment to racializing every single part of the character's backstory. Nothing is left, not even the god. If they left Athena's race undefined, the whole ancestral argument could fall apart.
So it's a closed system, designed from the ground up to produce one single predetermined result. Annabeth Chase is white.
Derived from a 100% white father and a white goddess. And to really seal the deal, the source then introduces one final rule, a universal test for identity. Hashtag 2.3, the source's black ancestor test.
Okay, what is this final test?
The source creates a specific standard for what it means to be black and then applies it in reverse to Annabeth. It says, unless you have a black ancestor at some point, you don't have any chance to be black.
So black identity, in this view, is defined exclusively by having a quantifiable black ancestor somewhere in your family tree. It's purely about bloodline.
Precisely. And since the author believes they've already proven that Annabeth has 100% white parentage from Frederick and Athena, She therefore fails this test. She has no black ancestor.
Which means, by their own rule, she has no chance to be black. She can only be white.
It's the final lock on the argument. So if you look at this whole section, it's this incredible interlocking chain of logic.
Yeah, it starts with a broad philosophical claim.
A black girl can't be someone who isn't black.
Then it moves to a very specific, and I have to say questionable, ancestral analysis.
Frederick's German name, Athena's asserted race.
And it all ends with this strict universal lineage test.
The black ancestor. All three parts work together to prove one thing, that Annabeth's whiteness isn't just a description, it's her unchangeable genetic and mythological.
And that level of commitment then forces the source to go even bigger. It's not enough to define the character's race. They have to define the race of the entire culture the story comes from.
Exactly. The argument has to scale up from Annabeth to ancient Greece itself.
All right, let's look at how they connect the character to the gods and the Greeks. So the argument now zooms out. It moves from Annabeth's specific family tree to the entire cultural and historical setting of the books.
It has to. The source needs to anchor its claims about the character in something bigger, something it presents as historical fact. The logic is the race of the character has to match the race of the source.
And the source makes an incredibly bold claim about that culture. It wraps up history and mythology into one single absolute statement.
It does. It says it's like saying that Greek gods can be black even though Greeks are 100% white, especially...
Okay, there is a lot to unpack in that one sentence.
A tremendous... You have two huge claims happening out. First, the historical Greeks are 100% white, and second, the mythological claim that follows. Therefore, the gods must also be white, especially the gods.
Let's take the first one. That 100% white label applied to an entire historical population. We saw that with Frederick. What's the function of using that 100% number here?
It's meant to establish the cultural backdrop as racially monolithic pure. By claiming that ancient Greeks were 100% white, the source is basically saying that the world these stories come from had no race.
And if the source world had no diversity,
then any adaptation of that world or its myths must also have no race. It rhetorically forbids it. It treats any deviation from that asserted purity as a historical inaccuracy.
So it's not just an artistic choice anymore, it's a factual error in this view.
Precise. And that leads right into the second part of the claim, about the gods themselves. If the human culture is 100% white, then their gods must be white, presented as a logical necessity.
The source is basically demanding that the fiction has to be a literal, racially pure reflection of its own perception of history.
That's it, exactly. Mythology becomes a historical document with strict racial... But I think the most interesting part of that quote is the little tag at the end.
Especially the gods.
Yes, especially the gods. Why add that? The source already said Greeks are 100%. Why the extra emphasis on the gods?
What do you think that tells us about the author's thinking?
I think it creates a hierarchy of race, a hierarchy of importance. It suggests that while it's important for the mortal Greeks to be white, and for the demigod Annabeth to be white, it is most important for the gods at the top of the...
They're the source of the lineage, the source of the power. So they have to be the purest expressed white.
That's the implication. It's a totalizing argument. It says this entire narrative world, from its historical roots to its divine figures, down to this one teenage demigod, is and must be racially uniform and predetermined.
So for anyone listening, this connection is key. It shows how the source's argument isn't just about one character's hair color. It's a whole worldview about adaptation, demanding that the entire cultural setting adheres to this singular, rigid racial definition.
And once you've built a case that is this comprehensive, covering visuals, ancestry, history, and mythology, there's only one thing.
You have to formally name the crime and pass judgment.
Exactly. You need a label for the transgression.
Okay, so this is the final piece of the puzzle. The source now uses a very specific term to categorize and, frankly, condemn this casting choice.
It does. The term is blackwash. And in the context of this argument, that word isn't just a critique. It functions as a final definitive verdict. It's the label for the perceived crime.
And the judgment that comes with that label is, well, it's extreme. The source doesn't just say it was a bad idea. It says this casting is the dumbest thing Disney did.
We have to analyze that hyperbole. Think about everything a massive company like Disney does. All the business decisions, the movie releases, the theme park chain.
Billions and billions of dollars in decisions.
Right. And the source is rhetorically elevating this one casting choice above all of that. It's saying that violating its specific racial definition of this one character is the single greatest corporate and creative failure in the company's...
That is an incredible claim. It really shows how high the stakes are for the author. The integrity of the character's race as they see it is paramount.
Absolutely. The extremity of the judgment reinforces the extremity of the initial premise. If Annabeth's whiteness is a 100% non-negotiable fact, then changing it must be the worst possible mistake.
And to really hammer this point home, to make it feel like part of a larger pattern of bad decisions, the source makes a comparison to a completely different franchise.
This is a classic rhetorical strategy. To prove your point is a universal principle, you apply it to another well-known example. The source says this casting is as dumb as blackwashing Snape in the Harry Potter.
Okay, so bringing in a hypothetical Snape casting, why do that? What did that comparison achieve for the argument?
It attempts to universalize the crime of blackwash. The source is assuming that its readers would agree that casting a black actor as Snape would be an obvious, terrible mistake.
So it's using a hypothetical you're supposed to agree with.
To force you to agree with the real-world example they're mad about, it's saying, see, the principle is the same. It links the two, trying to establish that there's a universal, unacceptable practice of blackwashing white characters, and that Annabeth is just the latest.
So it's an attempt to move the argument from being about one specific character to being about a sacred rule of adaptation that applies to all fictional universes.
That's it. Precisely. The comparison is designed to make you feel that the outrage isn't just a niche fan complaint, but a defense of a universal standard of fidelity. It puts the Annabeth casting and the hypothetical Snape casting on the exact same level of...
So the argument really comes full circle here. It uses the term blackwashing, attaches this incredibly severe judgment to it, and then uses a comparison to another universe to prove that this is a universal creative sin.
It is a remarkably thorough and self-contained argument. Every piece is designed to reinforce the central claim that the casting is fundamentally wrong because it violates what the source unbreakable rules of visual, ancestral, and mythological.
So, after all that, we've really taken a deep dive into an incredibly dense, incredibly compact piece of source material.
That's amazing, isn't it? How many layers of argumentation can be packed into just 2 sentences?
It really is. We unpacked the demand for strict visual fidelity, blonde, white, gray eyes. We looked at the rigid, essentialist view of ancestry with the claims about Frederick's name and Athena's race.
Then we saw how that scaled up to claims about 100% white Greeks and their god. And finally, the ultimate judge.
And it's so important to remember as we wrap up that our entire goal here was just to examine the internal logic of this one source, to understand how one person chose to build this intricate case for defending a character's appearance.
Right. They built this airtight system for themselves, linking everything from linguistics to mythology, all to defend their core belief that the character must look a certain way. They see adaptation not as an act of interpretation, but as an act of perfect reproduction.
Which really should make you, the listener, think about your own definition of fidelity and adaptation. Is it a literal physical match, the way this source insists? Or is there room for other things like thematic integrity or performance?
The source clearly made its choice. It prioritized the physical above all else.
And thinking about that prioritization leads us to our final provocative thought for you to take away from this. The source material defined Annabeth by 3 specific physical traits: blonde hair, white race, and gray eyes. Given how much time and energy the source spent building its most complex arguments around what constitutes 100% white heritage, analyzing a German name, asserting the race of a goddess, we leave you with this question. Based only on the arguments we analyzed in the text today, which one of those 3 traits, the hair color, the eye color, or the race, did the author of this source seem to prioritize as the single most crucial, the most non-negotiable element of Annabeth's identity?
It's a question about the hierarchy of the argument itself. Which trait got the most elaborate? It's something to chew. Thank you for joining us for this really intensive deep dive.
Until next time, keep digging into your source.